Hello, I'm Jamie Thome. Thank you for joining us for this Artist Bookhouse conversation. This month, we're talking with Sarah Noreen, who is a bookbinder for the U.S. government. We'll talk about how she got that job and what she does in a minute. Thank you for joining us. Okay, everybody, we're here talking with Sarah Noreen, whose BFA is from the School of the Art Institute, Chicago, and focusing on photo and printmaking. And then you got your MFA at University of Wisconsin-Madison in printmaking.
Yes.
But I'm curious, how did you come to the book arts?
So, well, when I was at SAIC, there was, I think, 2 artist books classes. There's like Artist Books 1 and Artist Books 2. And I took them both. I took the first one. I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And when I took that class, I realized that it's a really great way to incorporate other art making media into a book. You know, like the definition of a book was quite broad. So I made photo books. I turned my prints that I made into books. I did my MFA in printmaking, but I was never that interested in creating editions of prints,
Fine art printing.
Exactly. Each print being exactly the same. I liked printmaking because I could make multiples. That way I could experiment and then have backups if the first one didn't work out well. So I did a lot of cutting prints up, turning them into books or turning them into other things. So
just playing around. So
yes.
it feels like the whole idea of the book as art form in and of itself was what drew you to it.
Yes.
You are now a bookbinder for your job.
Yes.
So I'm curious how that one class, that path went.
I just got really excited about the possibilities. I feel like it wasn't just one thing. It didn't have to be a linear book with pages that you read and were in a specific order. There were books that were more sculptural. There were books that were, huge or tiny or made from edible things, or it just seemed like the possibilities were just enormous. And I was really drawn to that. My path to my current job was kind of unexpected. I finished I finished up at the University of Wisconsin. And then right immediately after, I got an internship at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. in their screen printing department. It was just for the summer. And so I was already in D.C. and my husband, had a job here. And so that internship ended, and my next door neighbor happened to be the head of printmaking at the Corcoran College of Art. And she was like, we just started a brand new book arts program and we need somebody to teach. And I was like, oh, I'll do it. I'm interested. And so I was an adjunct faculty at the Corcoran for 5 years, and I taught, classes in paper making. I taught their box making class, which was very popular. And then Japanese binding. I was also a thesis advisor, and I taught their thesis class because it's a master's degree program.
Yeah. Now, did you get to help shape that program at all?
Yeah, I did. I helped shape, especially the thesis program. But then George Washington University took over the Corcoran School, and then I think the art collection from the Corcoran Museum went to the National Gallery. Yeah, right around that time is when one of my friends who, she worked with somebody that used to work at the GPO, so the government, it's used to be called the Government Printing Office. It's now called the Publishing Office because we don't always do print. We don't only do print work. She knew someone that used to work there and found out that they were looking for hand bookbinders, and was like, you should, and I know, and she told him that she knew a bookbinder and that I should apply for this job. So I did, and I got hired, and I didn't even know this type of work existed within the federal government.
I didn't even know until you told me. I mean, I knew you were a barbler, and I knew it was associated with the Smithsonian somehow, but yeah. I didn't realize what you actually do in the GPO. So
Yeah.
what's also interesting is GPO, Government Printing Office, Government Publishing Office, they didn't have to change any kind of acronym.
Yes,
Or
exactly.
I
No,
love that.
handy.
So
Yeah.
what is your normal day in normal times look like when you go to work?
The GPO is the publishing house for all of the federal government. So any kind of publishing work that any agency wants to do, they have to send through us. And so it's a publishing company. So we publish books, but I work in the library binding section, which is where all the handmade things are made. So we do there's the mass produce, thousands of copies of some hardback or paperback book, but then in my section, we would do maybe the presentation copies for something.
Right, the fancy pants stuff.
The fancy pants stuff, right. That's where all the edge marbling happens and the leather and the gold foil stamping and things like that. So I do a lot of work. We do a lot of work for Congress. I also do a lot of work for the Senate Library. I make a lot of boxes for them. Right now I just got a job on Friday. I have to make 12 gavel boxes.
Yeah, that is really, really cool.
Yeah, so it's very, some of it can be really tedious and boring. Mm-hmm. Stamping tabs to go on a book.
Yeah.
Interesting. But other times it's super fun. So
yeah,
this is just like any other job.
Talk to me about this first slide. This is one of your first artist books, right?
Yeah, this is one of my very first artist books, and it is a kind of a carousel folded paper book, and all the little flags that you see are stops along the Empire Builder route between Chicago and Whitefish, Montana. The Empire Builder is a train. It's the Amtrak train between Chicago, the route between, it goes all the way to Seattle, but I would always get off in Whitefish, Montana, because that's where my parents live. So a lot of my personal work is it's kind of about identity, but it's also about travel and just being from different places and not really having a roots. I mean, I moved from Saudi Arabia to Thailand, from Thailand to Montana, and then Montana to Chicago. So it was I just got really good at going with the flow, and I still am, but this has been kind of a theme in my work, is that having a sense of place or not having a sense of place. So this Empire Builder is about traveling to and from Chicago and Whitefish, Montana on the train, because that's what my parents could afford, as far as bringing me home for Christmas or summer. The reason why I did this kind of circular structure is because it's kind of going round and round, you go back and forth. And
the map itself that makes up the carousel pages, that's like a topographical map. Yeah. Where did you find that?
So when I was at the University of Wisconsin, the cartography department was dumping a bunch of their old maps, and I just took them all. I took a whole bunch of them because I can use this for something. So it's kind of like the landscape, and then the flags are these stops along the way, and some of these names are totally where is this place in the middle of North Dakota? It's literally, the stop is literally a platform with nothing around it.
Let's move on to your next slide, because I'm really fascinated with this. It's called Memory of Home, and it's handmade paper embedded with herbs, spices, and grains, hand sewn onto a silk organza coat with a gold metallic thread. And I'm curious, you mentioned that identity is important in your work. Is this part of that theme?
It is. So I mentioned earlier, I moved around a lot growing up. We couldn't take much with us. It was just our clothes. So this is kind of, what can you pack on you, or what can you bring with you that you can wear, so you're not traveling with a bunch of luggage, right? Our memories are tied a lot with our sense of smell. And so for me, if I smell this coat, it reminds me of my mother's or my grandmother's cooking. And it's this long coat, and it kind of has a scale kind of look to it. So it's somewhat a little bit reminiscent of armor almost. It's like a protective garment.
Is this abaca?
It's flax, but it's overbeaten. It was it's super translucent, a thin sheet, and then laid the spices out on it and put another sheet on top. And then I sewed each one individually onto this coat.
This is so beautiful. And where does this coat live from now? In a box? Because
it's in my attic studio here, in between two giant pieces of archival foam core.
I love the idea of having something that's wearable that isn't wearable, really, because you wouldn't want to wear this really for real.
I would wear it maybe for a show or something.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about this? It's so beautiful.
Thank you. So that one, it's an example of my hoarding. I made out of around 500 letters that I have been collecting since I was 10 years old. The older ones are at the top, and as you go down, they get newer. When we moved to Thailand, that's when I first started like having a pen pal. I would write to my friends who would stay behind. And so every time we moved, I'd kind of collect more people I would write letters to. And I would save them all. I would save all the letters I received. And one day I was like, I have like all these boxes of letters. What am I going to, I can't save them for the rest of my life just as boxes of letters. So I'm like, what can I make out of this? It becomes a useful object, right? Because it's clothing. Yeah. The idea is that you're turning this thing that you want to save, or these things that you want to save, into something that's functional. So
and it's also kind of thinking about the memory of the people that you're wearing your memory literally on your body. And I love that.
Paper letters people don't really write them anymore.
Yeah.
I do once in a while try to send notes and cards, but not nearly like we used to.
Yeah, which I think is sad, but also, a product of our time.
Yeah.
So the next slide, now I think the next slide is, you're marbling on the edges of a book.
Yes.
And this, I believe, is at your work. Is that the job?
This is at my work. So that pattern that you see there is what gets marbled on the edges of the White House inventory books, which is literally an inventory of all the objects that are in the White House. And
wow,
3-volume set, and we make new ones for every administration. So this was me testing out my colors and patterns on some just blank notepads before I went to the actual book. We actually make blank notepads all the time, and we, other people that work there come down and take them, and we give them away when people come for tours. We give those away as little souvenirs.
Talk a little bit about the marbling aspect. You had sent a video.
Mm-hmm.
It basically shows a poster on the wall with different historical marbling styles. Do you have to concentrate on replicating those most of the time, or sometimes can you be more creative?
Most of the time we have to replicate them. For instance, the White House inventory book that I just mentioned, we essentially have to copy what has always been done.
Which is this pattern here.
Which is that pattern. Things change because now we use acrylic paint. Back then they would hand grind their own paint with dry pigments. We don't do that anymore.
Why not?
So much longer and so much more work. So the colors might change a little bit, but it's still red, yellow, blue. It's still the nonpareil pattern. Yeah. And in fact, the first time I did this job, they didn't send us an actual book. They sent us a photograph of one that was made in 1901 or something like that. And it looks exactly like we had to replicate it.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of that going on.
Wow. That is super cool.
Yeah. So the reason why I sent you publicly available photos from work is because we're not allowed to take pictures.
Yeah. Talk to us about this one.
So this one is presentation copies we made of this book. It's called The Science, The Endless Frontier. It was a reprint celebrating, I think, the National Science Foundation's 70th anniversary. And so this was an example of a situation where I could be creative with the marbling. We knew what color the leather we were using, this black, and then they had selected machine marbled end papers, or paper for the end papers. So I came up with the edge marbling that would look good with the paper they selected for the end sheets and also the cover of the book.
And that's gold foil on the cover. Well, that is just great. So where do these books end up that when you make a presentation copy?
I think just important people. I have another presentation copy book that we made that I can talk more about because I actually received a copy.
Oh, cool. And I assume Library of Congress probably gets one.
Yeah,
Probably Dr. Fauci, maybe.
Maybe he got one.
Maybe he got one.
Yeah.
Okay. The next slide is the one you were talking about with the inaugural boxes.
So we made 350 of these, and then we also made 35 leather covered boxes. And again, I don't have photos of that because we're not allowed to take pictures and I couldn't find a publicly available one. But the leather covered boxes went to the president, the vice president, speaker of the house. Those were personalized, had their name stamped on them. For this box, planning for the inauguration luncheon starts, months and months in advance. And I met with people on the committee and they told me what they wanted to put in the box. So the plan was to have this set of stationery in the box with a letter opener and a pen. So I made 3 different prototypes. This is the one that they picked. Interestingly, so Roy Blunt, who is senator from Missouri, I believe.
Yes.
He is the chairman of the committee, and he picked the maroon because of Missouri State colors.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's why that's a maroon box.
And then the marbled paper, you marbled all this.
I did not marble that paper because
it's 350 copies.
Yes, exactly. And we have kind of stock marbled paper that we use for end sheets and things like this. It's actually machine marbled and it comes from France. And it comes in a bunch of different colors. And the reason for that is because the volume, the amount of paper we would go through, it just doesn't make sense to marble our own. Although I have done it for special projects. Mm-hmm. If for instance, I actually took some machine marbled, navy blue machine marbled paper and they wanted more gold on it. So I marbled some more additional gold onto already marbled paper.
Yeah, which is kind of a cool project to do.
It is kind of cool.
And the next slide is this the one you were talking about that you got to have a copy of?
Yes.
This Spying on Whales.
And I actually have my own personal copy that I have right here.
Oh.
These are presentation copies for curator at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. His name is Nick Pineson. He wrote this book and we made 20 presentation copies that went out to the director of the Natural History Museum, people that have helped him, with his research, me, because I'm actually a personal friend and I helped him make this book. So this is an example of, he came, he met with us, he had an idea of what the cover would be like. I have my initials stamped down there. But he came and met with us and he talked about, the color of the book that he wanted to kind of go with the commercially published hard copy book, and it's mostly blue. So we picked this nice leather, and then the artist that did the illustrations on the inside of the book also helped design the cover. So these are the illustrations on the inside. So the same guy that did the cover illustration, but I helped him kind of figure out the file to make the die, because at first there was like way too much solid and you wanted more like lines so it would stamp nicely. And I actually foil stamped this cover. And then he had us personalize, like put initials of the people who were receiving the copies. So this is an example of, we use this blue marbled paper for the end sheets that we have in stock, and then I came up with like the edge marbling that would kind of go with it.
Yeah, I love that edge marble. What is that called, the style of that design?
This is like an Italian vein. So they have a lot of open spaces and you see these like little vein patterns. So I would call this an Italian
vein
pattern. Yeah.
So talk to us about your studio and about this slide. Is this the fabric one?
The fabric, yes. So I have 2 kids and a full-time job and a house and a dog. So I don't have a lot of free time to make art. So marbling, I find, is just a really easy way for me to like do something creative. And it's almost instant gratification. I start off with marbling on paper and I do the edge marbling at work. And then I took a marbling on fabric class. And so I was like, oh, it opens all kinds of possibilities. Now I can marble on fabric. That means I can marble on, cotton. I can maybe try marbling on some book cloth.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm just like, I want to try all the things,
All the things. Yes.
See what happens.
It's kind of like when you're talking about this, it reminds me of just a little bit ago when you were talking about your first book arts class, and it opened up that window for you, that door. Yeah. I love it. And then this is the slide, the last slide you have is on paper. And I know you're doing a tutorial for us, which I'm so excited about, but can you walk us through some of the steps of marbling and maybe talk about these patterns on this incredibly beautiful.
Yes. All of these are combed patterns. So with marbling, there's a few different tools you can use. I mean, you could just drop some paint on the bath and then use a bamboo skewer and just swirl the colors around and lay your sheet of paper down and pick it up, and then you'll have a marbled sheet of paper. But for these ones, the ones especially near the front, they're all using combs. It's just a piece of wood with nails or pins stuck in it at intervals. Yeah. And then the way that you comb through the bath, you can create, different patterns. This first one, the blue, yellow, green one is called an Icarus. And I used a rake, which is wider spacing, and then use a nonpareil comb, which gets like the little kind of small arches. Yeah. And then
the feathering that happens.
And then I went back through with the wider rake again.
So, but the process is where maybe you lay your color down and then you rake through this way and maybe rake through this way. Do you clean your comb off each time?
No.
You just rake through?
I just rake through. I might clean it off between sheets of paper. Like this one is mostly blues and greens and yellow. When you put your rake in, it's near the top of your tank. And so any kind of residue sits right there. And then when you pull it through, your sheet of paper is going to be smaller than your full tank. So it's not going to catch all of the edge stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes the edge stuff can be beautiful too.
Yeah, I agree.
And then who taught you how to marble? Where did you learn marbling?
I did a little bit kind of on my own. And then when I started at the GPO, they had a marbling setup there, and their head forwarder had left before I arrived. So it was more like, here's the stuff, figure it out, kind of a thing. And so there's a lot of experimenting. And then I found, so Regina and Dan St. John, of Chena River Marblers, they do classes and they travel around. They were doing a workshop. I signed up to take their class, and I got the GPO to pay for it because I needed the training. So
professional development.
Exactly. They were totally on board because the head forwarder who would normally do the training had retired and they hadn't replaced him yet. And,
that is so cool. Yeah. And so is this your setup at work, or is this your studio?
This is my setup at, my studio is at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center. Which is a nonprofit art organization, and they specialize in book arts, printmaking, papermaking, and letterpress. And
yes, we love Pyramid Atlantic. We love them. Yes.
So they I've been involved with this organization pretty much since we moved to Maryland.
And so when you're marbling, you get yourself into a Zen mode, I'm imagining. Yeah. And then how much marble paper do you make in a session? Like, can you estimate your groove?
I would say about 20. I don't really count. Because there's a lot of prep that goes into marbling that you have to do kind of, like the day before or way before. Like you have to alum all your paper day or two in advance so it has time to dry, and then you have to mix your carrageenan a day ahead of time, mix your paint probably a day ahead of time, or if because the paint, if you mix it, it doesn't last that long. It might last a couple of weeks, but if you need to mix new paint, you want to mix it like a day ahead just so it has time to fully dissolve into the water and not be clumpy. So what I do is I alum a whole bunch of paper ahead of time, And then I usually, sign up for a four-hour time chunk to marble. So I just, as much as I can do in that time period. And sometimes it doesn't go well and I just get frustrated. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take a break. Yeah. Sometimes it goes great and everything is fantastic. So it just really depends.
You love those days. Mm-hmm. Any projects that you're working on specifically right now?
I've got a few boxes that I'm working on. One of them is a box from my husband for all of his 45s.
Oh, cool.
And I'm working on a clamshell for my Spying on Wheels book, just to keep it nice.
I just want to thank you so much for talking with me today. What an amazing job you have for the federal government. And I'm just so pleased to have gotten a chance to speak with you. And thank you also for telling us about your artist books and I love the idea of identity and memory all tied into pieces that are just so gorgeous. So thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to view more conversations and our series of 2020 Quarantine Tours with artists and book artists and bookbinders and printers, please visit our programming tab on our website. And if you love this program, please support us at artistbookhouse.org/donate. Thank you so much.